Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagen. We are back here in Studio 130 for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the Gold Standard and Iowa Conservative Podcast. Once again, you have John Hendrickson joining me here today. John's ready to go. He's got the Miami University coffee mug. You know, John, one of these days I'm going to have you share the story behind that coffee mug because we like, that's the bit, right? Yeah. But you don't have any memorabilia, so someday you can share the story of the Miami University coffee mug. But today's not that day.
No.
I'm not going to put that on you today. Yeah. But good. Anyway, you're well caffeinated and ready to go, correct?
Yep.
Okay, good. We have got a lot to cover today, and as we have promised folks in the last couple episodes, we have poll results today.
Yes, and they're exciting.
They are exciting.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna go through all of that. But first, and maybe I'm just, even though this is the poll results episode, I have to address this piece that we saw in the news recently, John, which has to do with the Polk County Supervisor's pay increase for the year. Did you see this?
I did, yeah.
Okay, good. Are you excited about their? Neither one of us are Polk County residents,
no.
I mean, we have fled to Dallas County. But
I was actually shocked. I didn't realize the salary they made. That surprised me, and I shouldn't have been surprised by that. But
it was actually 2 or 3 years ago where they actually eclipsed what the governor makes, which I think is a significant point in this, but. Initially, I mean, I read this in the Des Moines Register, and we like to give them credit when they get something right. But they had a great headline in this article. I opened it up, I was like, wow. The headline was Polk County Supervisors Continue Unbroken String of Annual Salary Increases. Well, that headline didn't last very long because the headline now reads, Polk County supervisors who make more than Iowa's governor give themselves another raise, which is still a little bit critical of the supervisors, but not quite as stinging as the original one. But for those that haven't read this article, the Polk County Board of Supervisors voted to raise their pay 4% for next year, and they will now make $149,290 per year. And you asked a question about this. Is that a full-time job?
Yes, yeah.
And well, technically or practically. And look, I don't know. Never been a Polk County supervisor before. It is a full-time job. So to be fair, and I suppose like with many jobs, you can put as much time into it or as little time into it as you want. And I think they are active in the community and they have meetings but. I don't know that 40 hours as a Polk County supervisor is the same as 40 hours, breaking large rocks or whatever, or working in a free market think tank.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a very generous salary. And look, for those that can make it, great. But I do think it's interesting to note that the governor of the state of Iowa makes $130,000 a year. So look, Polk County's a big county. I don't know that the job they do is worth more than the job of leading the state of Iowa.
Yes, yeah.
And I have always thought that the governor of the state of Iowa should be the state's highest paid elected official.
Now, did I understand the article right that it's not just the supervisors that make more than the governor, but it's most of the county officials?
All of the county officials do. Now, in most counties, I can't say that in every county, but in most counties, the county attorney is the highest paid elected official. And because often they can make pretty good money in a private practice. So it's just fair to compensate them with what they might make on the community. So Kimberly Graham, the Polk County attorney, and I'm glad you asked, John, makes $255,000 a year. That's a generous salary, even for most attorneys in the state of Iowa. I believe that $255,000 would make Kimberly Graham, the Polk County attorney, the highest paid elected official in the state of Iowa. I could be wrong. If somebody out there is hearing me and they know of another one, let me know. But I'm pretty sure that that's it. Certainly more than our Supreme Court justices, which if you want to talk about replacement salary from serving on the Iowa Supreme Court, and we can have another conversation about judicial pay another day. Yeah. But these salaries seem to be very generous. And especially when we also hear in the same article complaints about they're going to have to tighten their belt because of the legislative property tax bill last year, which is a whole other thing. But it's just 149,290, and it's also the Register does a good job of checking what do large counties and surrounding states do. The largest one is Sedgwick County, Kansas at 104.5, Ramsey County, Minnesota 101. So it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
I have long said, and I've joked, the best job in Iowa politics is Polk County Supervisor. Yeah. Without question.
And the Ramsey County comparison surprised me because that's St. Paul.
Right.
That's the capital.
Right.
And so that's a fairly big city.
Dakota County, Minnesota, that's not Minneapolis, is it?
No, I don't believe so, no. Hennepin, I believe.
Yeah,
Hennepin
that's what
County.
I thought. Okay. Yeah. Well, you're our Minnesota expert here, so you tell me. Anyway, that's just something that, they have to explain to voters.
Yeah.
And if they're worth it, they're worth it.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I think it was Steve Van Ort who was quoted in the article being one of two to vote against it, basically saying that, it was not justifiable to his constituents.
Yep. Steve Van Ort's on the ballot this year too, John. So that may factor into that as well.
Yeah.
And Matt McCoy, who represents more or less the south side of Des Moines, Democrat, former state senator, who actually, I served with Senator McCoy for, I think, my first 4 years in the legislature.
That's right.
And I served on his committee when he was chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Budget Sub. And he has a fiscal conservative streak to him. No, I think that's a legitimate concern from Supervisor McCoy.
Yeah, one thing, and you highlighted this, was the article quotes County Administrator John Norris.
Yeah.
And it says, County Administrator John Norris, however, told the board the county could face $4 million to $5 million shortfall in the next 2 years, which he blamed on the state legislation last year that imposed sweeping property tax cuts, reining in local government's revenue growth. And then Norris added that could get worse. And I couldn't help but think of one is, and we've talked about this before, this continual blame game that goes on by not just in Polk County, but we've seen multiple local governments say the same thing as a result of this property tax bill. And the other thing is I want to know, we always hear them complaining about local control and everything, but I've yet to see any plans to address high property taxes.
No.
Or to address their constituent concerns with high property taxes. And so this seems to be, this blame game is getting out of control. And, I was reading some, because other states are going through this same struggle.
Sure.
And yesterday I was looking at some things that our colleagues in Montana had produced in terms of property tax reform. And they were also talking about the blame game that goes on in Montana. And one thing that they highlighted, and you and I have talked about this multiple times, is they said, why can't local governments, Montana, start budgeting like the state government is doing? And we've said the same thing. The legislature and Governor Reynolds have, held the line on spending. They've made tough decisions. They've controlled the growth of spending. Why can't locals start doing that?
Because local control is only for taking more of our tax dollars and limiting our individual freedom.
Yeah.
We've established this now. Local control is never about honoring the taxpayer or increasing individual liberty.
And they even admit it. You're reining in local government's revenue growth. So it's, I don't see that as cuts. And again, I always say that only in government, when you slow the growth of spending, is that viewed as a cut.
Yes, that is correct. It's infuriating.
Yes, yeah.
So, well, anyway, I had to talk about it, John. I had to get it off my chest. That's a lot of money. So
it is, yeah.
Good. It's up to, and ultimately, you know what? Local control about this. It's up to voters in Polk County whether they think that's relevant to everything. So anyway, okay. Time to talk about poll results, John, which
Yes.
is what most of our listeners came here
That's
today
right.
to listen to, is to hear us. So this is the first time we have done this in several months. First time this year. We wanted to take kind of our general look at political trends in the state of Iowa. We also wanted to ask some issue questions because there's a lot of stuff in the legislature right now that are more of our organization's issues. But you've had a chance to read through all these and the takeaway. I think my biggest takeaway in all of this, John, is that the political breakdown trends, where Iowans are at politically, still remains very stable from where it has been over the last 2 to 3 years. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah.
Yeah. That there's some movement in here, but by and large, what we saw leading up to the 2022 election is still at place here in Iowa.
Yes, yep.
One thing, so we'll click through some of these results, and I know that people really love it when we talk lots of numbers on the podcast. Yeah. So we'll try and keep things a little more thematic, but the generic ballot. Now, if you're not familiar with what the generic congressional ballot, all things being equal, we're not putting any names on the question. Would you vote for a Republican or vote for a Democrat for Congress? That's usually a pretty good indicator of just where things are at in the electorate. And that has tightened a little bit in Iowa. But our pollster Cygnal has also said that by and large, that tightening has been Democrats coming home to say they vote for Democrats.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
so before there were some Democrats that were undecided on that question. By and large, Democrats have come home. But that is still a 50 to 38 question, Republican over Democrat. So the main thing is, like, where is Iowa at? Is that we are in a plus 12 environment. So that's a very strong number. In October of 22, that was actually a plus 16, but that was, again, some Democrats coming home in there. But that number has never been closer in the last 2 years, has never been inside of 10 points. So consistently double-digit generic Republican state in Iowa. Where you can see some of this Democrats coming home is in the approval rating of President Biden. So, as we have said many times, President Biden is deeply unpopular in the state of Iowa by about a 2-to-1 margin. That remains. You still have 65% of Iowans have an unfavorable view of President Biden. A slight uptick in his favorability, again, with Democrats coming home, but you're still looking at a 65 to 34. 2-to-1, Iowans disapprove of the job. And it's a favorability. It's not a straight up a job approval rating, but they just simply don't have positive feelings about President Biden. This kind of interested me a little bit, kind of surprised me, was Donald Trump's favorability rating, which is actually improved.
Yes. Yeah.
That was it's still underwater, as you may have seen, John.
Yes.
President Trump generates strong opinions one way or the other.
That's right. Yeah.
There's not a lot of people out there that are lukewarm on Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So his unfavorable is 53 and his favorable is 46, and I'm rounding here. That had been a minus 13 or 15 over the last couple of polls, but that has tightened up, and it was his favorable rating is improved, which I think is really interesting. And now some of that is going through the caucuses and winning the caucuses, but I think for other figures going through a contested election, it's natural to have that tighten because there's a lot of negative messaging out there. But going through the caucuses, Donald Trump's approval rating in Iowa actually improved, which is interesting. The governor's approval ratings are largely similar to in the past. Same thing with approval rating of the legislature. The top priority. So we're going to start getting into the issue stuff. And that's where I need to stop so much of my talking and let you jump in here. Starting with what is the top priority for Iowans in this deals with in Congress, but we have a long list of things. I'm going to let you talk for a little bit about this because there was a shift here.
Yes, I wasn't surprised that the top issue of concern in the poll was illegal immigration and the border. I mean, that has that. I mean,
almost 20% of Iowans list that as their top priority.
Yes, yeah. What surprised me was that what came in second was threats to democracy at about 15%, and that beat out inflation and the economy, which got well close. I mean, 14.6, close to 15. If I remember looking at the crosstabs, the threats to democracy had a higher percentage of independents and Democrats listing that as
that's
their
a
concern.
Straight up proxy for left
and that
leaning voters.
That concerns me because one thing is I think this is a complete use of propaganda by the left.
Yes, it's a completely made up issue.
It scares me that people are buying into that. The threats to democracy, and so and seeing that higher than inflation was kind of surprising.
Inflation really declined there, John. Inflation in the economy was a top issue at 24% of Iowans last fall, and now that's down to 15%.
Yes, yeah.
What do you attribute that to? Do you think that is the economy in Iowa improving? Do you think it's people moving on to other issues?
I think I would say that this is one, it's still an issue out there, I think, inflation, but I do think that immigration has become such a hot issue.
Yeah.
And it's more in the headlines than inflation. And so I think that's one reason is that immigration has sort of become a major concern for a lot of voters. And the other thing is that I still think people are concerned with inflation because you can see the Biden administration saying, well, the economy is really not that bad, but people are still struggling with high prices at the grocery store, and so inflation is still a factor. And the economy may show signs of doing okay, but it's people are not seeing that.
I think there's an overall uncertainty that lingers about everything around us.
Absolutely,
whether it's the economy, whether it's wars, foreign policy, cultural decay. There's just the kind of the underpinnings of a stable, world around us. Like people are starting to have questions about that.
And talking with people from different states, everybody's talking about immigration right now. It's just an issue of concern because it's getting out of hand.
So note this, because I agree. I think immigration is going to be one of the issues that is talked about in the presidential election.
Yes, yeah.
President Biden is starting to kind of zero in on a plan to talk about it, which surprises me. I think he'd want to either fix it or not talk about it at all. But I want to come back to that because I think we should explore that in another episode. And I don't want to spend too much time on this question, but I think to get off of it, one that you would hear in the media is that abortion will be a big issue in the campaign. Again, a lot of stability is that it's just not registering. This is number 6 on our list.
Yeah.
At about 8% of Iowans list that. And keep in mind, that could be folks that are on both sides of the issue.
That's right.
So it's, frankly, it wasn't a big issue even in the caucuses, and not a top issue in the ITR Foundation poll either. So people are much more interested in what candidates and leaders are having to say about immigration and inflation in the economy. So, okay. The big one on here is the Biden versus Trump top line. Who would you vote for? And that is very similar to that generic congressional ballot question, which will be at its +12. This is a +9, which is very similar. Last April, it was +6 for Donald Trump. Then it was 9 in the last 2 polls. So right now, if we voted today in our poll, it's a snapshot of a moment in time, would be a 9-point win in Iowa for Donald Trump. That feel about right to you?
Yes.
In all this, I do too.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I want to get on to these particular questions, and we added these next 2. I really think are important because they are the 2 constitutional amendments that have been proposed in the legislature this year. We talked a lot about the joint release between Senator Dawson and Representative Kaufman, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committees. These are the 2 constitutional amendments that ultimately, if passed by the legislature, Iowans would get to vote on.
Yes, yep.
And so, okay, Iowans, right now, as we sort of head into this, where are you at? The first one is the supermajority to raise taxes. So the Constitution would then require a 2/3 vote of the legislature on any tax increase. Okay? This, I thought this would poll well. I did not think it would poll this well.
Mm-hmm.
This was a 68% of Iowans said yes, they would vote for that. Only almost 18% of Iowans said no.
Yeah.
That what that means is this not only is this an overwhelming number, because you still have 15% undecided, is it overwhelming support for this question?
Yes.
Is that it cuts across party lines.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
You have a lot of independents and even a significant number of Democrats that are like, yes, it should be a lot harder to raise taxes in Iowa.
That surprised me to seeing that.
Yeah. As much as the left resists efforts to cut taxes, they overwhelmingly don't want to see them raised.
That's right.
Now there's a interesting contradiction in there, but Iowans, when you take away the messaging, because this is really sort of just a plain, let's strip away the Republican Democrat, let's strip away the battles that are in the in the Capitol, let's strip away what they've read on the Des Moines Register and the front page. Let's just ask them what they think about taxes.
That's right. Yeah.
And this is what they think. Yeah. They don't want to pay any more taxes, John.
Absolutely.
So
I think that's why we see the property tax issue across party divide too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the reasons that the legislature and the governor have continued to be so emboldened to continue on the tax cutting journey is because it's what Iowans want.
Yes. Yeah.
And it polls well, and they win re-election when they do this thing for Iowans, which is to reduce their property or their income tax burden.
Yeah.
So yes, one thing that was abundantly clear, especially off this question, is that the legislature should absolutely pass this resolution to continue the process to let Iowans vote on the supermajority.
Definitely strong support.
Also strong support was the next question was on the income tax amendment, which would, so we're moving towards a flat tax right now. We're not completely, that's not phased in completely, but they have passed the law, which will get us there. But it's only just the law.
Yes. Yeah.
If a future legislature wanted to completely scrap that and go back to an aggressive scheme which penalized higher earners, they could do that. So this would be an amendment that required a flat tax in Iowa.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Now this also polled very well at 48 to 28. It's almost 2-1, which is really strong. Not as good as the supermajority, but my sense, John, I want to know what your take is. It's just a little harder to think about what that is. 2/3 majority raise taxes, like, well, yeah. Okay, well, what does flat tax mean again? What, there have been other proposals in the past at the federal level, and I just think that just the undecided was a little higher on this question. Do you have a thought on that?
I agree with that because it's one and the first one, people are generally opposed to tax increases. And then the flat tax is still, yes, it's an issue that's been around, but it's still relatively new to Iowans. And so
none of us are living in that tax regime right now.
No, and so it's as one of our colleagues said, when we think of flat tax, you think of Steve Forbes and the flat tax revolution. Right. And so I think that was one reason here is people trying to realize what is a flat tax and what does that mean to my situation, and so it's going to take some time for Iowans to understand the benefits of the flat tax.
One thing that, if there's one takeaway from this entire poll, John, for me, it is this: take away any criticisms you have of the idea that us as an organization, our pollster, which I think are all unassailable. We've worked really hard to make this all good. But take away that, take away any of these ideas about margins of error and polls, all of those things. These numbers unequivocally say that Iowans want these kinds of constitutional protections.
That's right.
For their tax burden, and the state legislature should absolutely pick up these two proposals and run them.
Yeah.
We can't argue it.
No, this is a clear signal that Iowans, one, they want a lower tax burden and they want these protections.
That's right. Well, great. So I'm really encouraged by it all, and I look forward to kind of what the response is from that.
Yes, yeah.
Heading forward. 3 other issue questions. John, this is one that you and I have talked a lot about, but the illegal immigration question. So the question was, would you support or oppose Governor Reynolds sending the Iowa National Guard to the southern border to help stem the flow of illegal immigration? 56-39. That's a really strong support on that question, right?
Yeah.
Does that surprise you? Did you think it would be strong, more or less, or?
No, I thought it would. I thought this would poll strong because, again, the immigration issue is such a concern, and also the fact is that a lot of people are supporting what these governors are doing in response to the failed Biden administration. The other thing is that I think a lot of Iowans understand that just because we're not a border state doesn't mean that illegal immigration doesn't impact what goes on here in Iowa.
This is one, looking a little deeper into some of the kind of wonky numbers. These are certainly among the tax questions, but this polls better than, we have Governor Reynolds' name in the question. Mm-hmm. The issue polls better than the leader advocating it.
Yes, yeah.
That means that she's on the right track.
Yeah.
Following what Iowans want, which is action to address what's going on at the border. Foreign land, this one was a big number, John.
Yes, yeah.
You have that in front of you. Foreign land ownership.
Yep.
I know this is one that you've written about, so go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so this question asks, would you support or oppose placing additional limitations on foreign ownership of land in Iowa, especially farmland? And this was part of the governor's condition of the state address and part of her legislative agenda for this session. And this actually went higher than I thought. Mm-hmm. And so 76 support that versus about 17 opposed.
Yeah.
And so this was a huge amount. And I think, people are concerned about not only the growing influence of China, but also just, in a sense, foreign entities capturing infrastructure, whether it be land or something else, in the United States. And so I think this is, again, it shows that the governor's in the right position as well on this issue of having more oversight on, who is actually owning farmland.
Right. And in your writing and your research that you've done on this, we have pretty good laws on this already. Some of the better laws on this in the nation. But what we're having to fight against is inaction from the federal government tracking these things.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, again...
And also, who's... Because sometimes there's phony investors, who's behind the purchasing.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can put together an LLC in about a half an hour, and you don't know who's the investor behind it, and you buy it. It's so... That's right. We need more tracking, and Iowans get this because they understand what's going on out there. Last issue question, John, which I don't know if it surprised me, but we asked the Ukraine question again. Yeah. And this is solely, well, not solely. I mean, it's meaningful, but because you and I have spent quite a bit of time on this, would you support or oppose the U.S. Congress sending additional financial and military aid to Ukraine? That is not quite as good as it was last fall, but is still, well, I guess I should say it is ticked now where there is a slight opposition to it at 47 oppose, 46 support. Iowans are very divided on what we should do with Ukraine.
Yeah. And this reflects, I actually thought the opposition opposing this would be a lot higher. And it's close to even. I think this reflects the current divide in the nation as well, where Americans are divided on this. And also it shows the divide within the Republican Party on this issue.
Absolutely.
And so there's a great debate going on within the Republican Party on the direction of foreign policy. And I think, this is a reflection of it as well.
I'll have to dig into the crosstabs. And if you're not familiar, crosstabs is where we really dig into, okay, so what did Republicans say? What did, senior citizens say? All the different demographic.
I should have wrote it down, but if I remember, because I looked at the crosstabs, and I think the Republicans had a majority of opposing this, but
when we did this last time on Ukraine, and this was like sending... We asked this once with sending Iowans to fight in Ukraine.
Yes, yeah.
Sending troops over there. And Iowans, Republicans and independents were like, no, I don't think so. Not our sons and daughters. But Democrats were like, that sounds good to us.
Yeah.
And so it's been Democrats much more interested in that foreign active military financial. But I want to go in and see what that is, because I do think that this one cuts across party lines as well. You still have the old sort of anti-war left, and you have an anti-war, more non-interventionist Republicans.
That's right. Yeah.
And of which I think you would claim to be part of that.
This is just a complete side note, and I think we've talked about on the podcast before about a longtime congressman from Iowa called H.R. Gross.
Yeah.
And I saw a social media post because Gross was famous for basically wanting to prohibit all foreign aid, and so they were. Whoever, I forget where this came from, but basically wanted to say, we need to go back to what he was arguing.
Okay,
but there was a tradition in the Midwest of sort of being isolation.
So okay, all you podcast listeners out there in social media, I want you to think all the viral stars, all the people that are consuming bandwidth in your social media channels. Whether it be whatever new influencer, or maybe you right-wing commentators, or wherever you get your social media content from. John, this represents the first time that John has brought what he's getting in his social media feed, and it's H.R. Gross.
Yeah.
So it is, it's old Republican politicians from generations ago. That's what John's getting in his X feed or whatever it is. So great. Yeah. It's absolutely on brand, John. And I think the listeners should be very encouraged that's what you're bringing us today. So, okay. So if folks want to, we're going to put this all online. And well, I think as the time that we actually get around to publishing this podcast, it is online, and you can get it at itrfoundation.org. The link will also be at taxrelief.org. We'll have this more discussion on it in our social media channels. So if once you're done with, I don't know what time period was H.R. Gross.
He was in 50s and early 60s.
So after you have completely digested, political leaders from the 50s and 60s, and you move on to current events with will be in your feed on those things. And we do this simply as just part of our mission to try and increase public awareness of current issues of the day, and hopefully inform our leaders, our legislature, on directions that they could go on these issues. So please check it out. Because it's something that we put a lot of time and resources into, and we think it's good stuff. Mm-hmm. All right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good snapshot of where, Iowans are thinking right now.
Yep.
So
well, very good. All right, John, thanks a lot. With that's all the time we have for today. That's all the content we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends. Leave us a positive review. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.